Welcome to the African Alliance podcast, the Brilliant series, brought to you by the Brilliant Consortium's Community Engagement and Advocacy Workstream. This series introduces you to the scientists, researchers, and community activists driving innovation and social progress across our partner sites. In each episode, we'll hear from those in the front lines, whether they're uncovering groundbreaking scientific discoveries or working to empower communities through grassroots activism. These conversations give you an inside look at how collaboration between science and community is transforming lives, challenging systems, and creating solutions that can change the world. In this episode, I'll be speaking to CAPRISA's Dr. Nivashnee Naicker. So my name is Tia Johnson. I'm the founder and strategist here at the African Alliance. We were established many years ago as kind of what we like to think of as good troublemakers, constantly pushing the needle, constantly holding researchers and scientists to account as much as we hold ourselves to account, and really walking alongside you in terms of this, great scientific endeavor to get people solutions to some of the health problems that they face. We've got quite a long history of advocacy. I'm sure you might recall as far back as 702, where we engaged with you all to demand PrEP access for participants, etc. So it's really work that's close to our heart. We absolutely love it. We're spectacularly privileged and grateful to be part of this brilliant journey along with you. And it's always exciting to have these opportunities to chat. So I wonder if you could just, for the record, state your full name and your current role and the organization that you represent.
So I'm Dr. Nivashnee Naicker. So I will be a PI working on the Brilliant 001 trial. And I'm based at CAPRISA with the Center for the AIDS Program of Research in South Africa, based in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal.
So I want to take you back to 2022. Over 100,000 South Africans are dead, killed by coronavirus. And you, with the support of the MRC, are working on an assignment, I imagine, to complete your master's at a Swiss university. Of course, you later go on to get perfect scores on your finals and through your defense. And so you're sitting there and this is happening. You're doing this master's and the world is being devastated by this pandemic. Our lives are being changed. Our loved ones are being lost. Vaccines are so out of reach of so many people. The communities that have made a lot of these vaccines possible by participating in trials are looking at their TV screens. They're seeing people in the global north accessing vaccines. They're being told to wait. There's a phased introduction of vaccines. We aren't sure when we're getting these vaccines. And you're sitting there and you're preparing to wrap up this learning experience that's so close to the issue. We saw issues of vaccine research and development for the first time in many of our lives take space every day on the main news. You had Slim with his slides becoming almost a pop culture phenomenon. Everyone was talking about, the Indian professor from Durban with his, bushfires and tree slides. And it's just such a moment for you to be in, and almost a shocking intersection of just whatever the universe is doing, in terms of your studies and your career, and now this pandemic, and just such a different world. What is going through your mind? What are you thinking as you're looking at this and living in that very interesting time?
Now, Tian, it was an incredible time. I just felt it was, everything, everywhere all at once, everything was happening. I just enrolled for my master's, a little knowing that, in 2 months' time, the president was going to declare a public health emergency in the country. And it was just fortuitous that I was studying vaccinology at the time. I had the most knowledgeable people in the world teaching me about vaccinology just as the COVID pandemic started. And we were really figuring it out together. It wasn't like my mentors knew what was going on any better than me. We were actually figuring it out at the same time. And I'm just so thankful for the strong leadership that we had here in South Africa. You mentioned Slim already, but also Prof. Glenda Gray, Prof. Nigel Garrett, who works here at CAPRISA as well. We had really strong leadership, and they really directed us in what needs to be done, how soon it needs to be done, how do we get this done practically. It was really a trying time, but at the same time, because we had been so well prepared through our HIV vaccine research, we were so well positioned to actually take on this task, which was a global effort, a local effort. It was a personal effort because now you've got family members around you that are suffering from the disease. There were so many levels to this, but we were really prepared to take on this challenge. It was not easy. It was not easy seeing colleagues pass away. It was not easy seeing, some of our research participants even pass away from the disease. So I would say very challenging, but we stepped up. I feel as a research community, we did make a difference. Our participants were on board. They understood the seriousness of the disease, and everybody really came to the party. And I'm so proud of everybody's effort. It wasn't an easy thing to do, but we pulled it off.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all came out of that pandemic very different as a human race. I think, I remember speaking to Karesha in the early days and her describing this as, building a ship while it's sailing, and such an interesting time because, like you say, those that we usually look up to for answers were equally unaware of what next steps were going to come into play, and of course, like you're saying, building on all of this historical research, the conversation would never be complete, of course, without also, just recognizing the contribution and the work of, Professor Geeta Ramji and everything that she brought to the sector. And so from all of that, Nivashnee, what do you think the main lesson the field has learned from that experience?
I think, Tian, for me, it's that we should always be prepared. We always need to be prepared. We were prepared through our HIV vaccine research, but we realized at that point, the response that was needed was so much greater than what we were actually prepared for at the time. We really needed to pull together. We needed to pull out all the stops. We needed to gather as a research community. And that's the very reason we were successful in our COVID-19 response. So the main thing is that we have to be prepared, but prepared in a big way, because we never know when the next pandemic is going to be on our doorstep. So I think we were limited at the time. I think we grew as the pandemic grew. We grew our networks and we grew what we were capable of doing. But we'll just be that much more prepared the next time we are faced with such a challenge. But we did a good job. I think we were 50% prepared for the pandemic, to be honest with you. And we did the rest in that short space of time that we needed to do.
Yeah. And then, of course, you being part of the Sisonke team that brought, South African healthcare workers, those initial 500,000 doses. I certainly know that I am alive because of one of those doses. So it's really important, I think, to put faces to the effort. And so I think in general, there's a huge amount of gratitude to researchers and scientists like yourselves for playing that role. Conversely, Nivashnee, what do you think we still haven't learned? What lesson do you think we still haven't learned well enough to prepare us for the inevitable next pandemic?
Well, I think at the core of research is community engagement. I think that's something we struggled with some sectors of the population, I would have to say. We did struggle with them. Some people were not willing to come on board at that time and to, really do what it needs to take to get people vaccinated. So I think, ongoing community engagement is key. We know we've been doing this for many, many years now at CAPRISA, but there are still certain sectors of the population that need more engagement. They require more engagement in a scientific way. So just telling people, you should do this, you should vaccinate, it doesn't work. But if you present data to them, if you really present, hardcore data and show them, this is the trajectory of people who are not vaccinated during the pandemic. This is the trajectory of people who are vaccinated. I think using evidence-based medicine or evidence-based research to actually inform communities that are really just not on board with us. I think this is an important thing to do. I think there's a lot of misinformation on the internet and in other places, which really needs to be addressed. And I think we haven't done this yet. I think we really haven't done this yet. I think we haven't gone back to the communities and told them, by the way, these were the positive effects of the vaccine. So I think on some level, we've allowed this misinformation to actually circulate. And maybe we just haven't had the time to go back and let our communities know, that these were the positive outcomes. I'm not saying it was all perfect. It was all 100%. This was a rapid response to an emerging, public health emergency. So I wouldn't say we did things 100% perfectly, but we did the best that we could with what we knew at the time. And I think we did a pretty good job.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to come back to that issue about mis and disinformation in a bit, because I think it's absolutely critical. One of the things that attracted us to the Brilliant Consortium at proposal development stage was the preeminence that the call for proposals gave to communities. It really excited us for the first time in many of our lives, seeing a call for proposals from the United States government that specifically insisted on community representation in all decision-making structures of a scientific consortium, which we had not really seen before. Because like you say, we come from a history of really tokenistic community engagement, and we've always believed that the hard work is building that scientific literacy, of course, of community activists. So when we sit around the table with researchers and scientists like yourself, like Prof. Gray, and we're looking at these slides, they no longer seem like they're in a different language that we don't understand, but we can actually meaningfully engage and ask questions. So I think that's absolutely critical. And in speaking about Brilliant, could you describe to us your role within the Brilliant Consortium?
So I've been a clinical researcher for almost 18 years now at CAPRISA. So I first started out as a research clinician. I worked as a research clinician for 10 years. And in the past 7 years, going on to 8 years now, I've been the principal investigator on the HIV vaccine and pathogenesis program. I've been running the HIV vaccine trials network studies, as well as the COVID-19 prevention network studies. And I will now also be doing Brilliant studies. So I'll be the PI, the site PI at the CAPRISA eThekwini clinical research site.
So for some of our listeners who might not be clear, could you in a nutshell describe what does a PI do?
Okay, so a PI's role is a very important one, because ultimately the PI is responsible for everything that happens in a clinical trial from start to finish. Really from, sometimes you're also involved in protocol development, so writing the protocol and then getting the protocol approved through the various regulatory bodies. And these are multiple, right? So you've got your ethics committee, you've got your SAPRA, Department of Health approvals, etc. And then once you have your approvals in place, you actually now have to undertake the trial with your team. But ultimately, anything that's done in the trial, something as simple as reimbursing a participant, is your responsibility. So everything needs to be overseen with a very, very close eye. I'm particularly concerned around safety. So safety is my thing. I've been a safety clinician all of these years. It's very, very important to me that participants are well taken care of during their time in the study for safety reasons and just, in general. I am a very strong community advocate. I don't think you know this about me. So to the point where I actually go and present my protocols myself to the Community Advisory Board, because I think speaking to people is half your battle won. If you speak to people, they immediately trust you. Okay, they may not even be telling them the correct thing, but the fact that you took the time to come out and speak to them and explain something to them in layman's terms, they trust you already. So I think that's really key. It's really important we have these fantastic retention events at our site where we actually, the PIs are involved. We come on a Saturday, we speak to our participants, we listen to their fears, their concerns, and we try to improve things overall. So a PI's role is, what you would think traditionally, it used to be limited just to the scientific part of a protocol. It's no longer that. If you do not engage the community as a PI, it's going to be very difficult to do your research. So I think that's one of the things that I've learned over the years. Engage, engage, engage.
Absolutely. That's such a great reflection. I remember over 10 years ago when we had one of these, I think it was an HVTN meeting, but we had a meeting with a range of cabs. And one of them said, they had never seen their PI through the entire duration of the trial. And that was kind of like, it really hit home to say, oh gosh. And I think it's some of those lessons clearly which the sector has learned. I think by, the example you're sharing of being visible, being present, being openly engaging. I think it's so powerful to build confidence in the process and the product. And so that's really, really key. But it's been over a year now since the consortium kicked off its work. How would you describe year one for us and your role in the consortium in the first year of Brilliant?
I think we've had a great year so far. So it started off really well in Cape Town when we had our launch meeting. And since then, we've really been very busy with all the preparatory work that needs to be done for Brilliant 001. And as you may know, Tian, the preparatory work for trials these days is becoming a lot. It's because of our trials being so highly regulated. There's so many regulatory bodies that we have to answer to, and we have to make sure that everything's in perfect order before we submit a protocol. And further to that, our protocol is actually becoming more complex these days. So this is something that we do need to be cognizant of when developing protocols. The more complex your protocols, the more regulated you're going to be, and it's going to take longer to start up your trial. So we have been quite busy, but we're looking forward to starting Brilliant 001 very soon. Things have taken shape very nicely.
I think it's also about the regulatory environment and the complexity of setting up a trial that more and more communities need to hear about. Because certainly during COVID, a lot of the mis and disinformation and hesitancy was really fueled by this perception that vaccines are flying in from overseas and going straight into our arms, but so little focus being paid to the amazing work that the regulators are doing, that all the preparatory work, all the quality checks, all of these like national domestic controls that we have in place to safeguard the well-being and health of our people. So I think that's a really, really important point that will certainly amplify to drive home the point that it's certainly not the Wild West, but there's a conscious and deliberate effort to ensure that the products do what they're supposed to do and cause no harm. South African research in particular is sometimes coming under scrutiny because it plays such a dominant role. There's quite a significant volume of research coming out of the country. And at times, it almost feels that South Africa is Africa. And so, of course, Brilliant is very different in this regard because it's not only South Africa, it's a range of African countries that perhaps at times don't really receive the focus and the spotlight that South Africa does. And so I think it's great that Brilliant has expanded this kind of remit to other countries and the important work that they're doing. What excites you about bringing on all of these additional countries into Brilliant? And how do you think they can really come to the fore and demonstrate to the world what we've always known, is that they too are leaders in the endeavor?
No, absolutely, Tian. I think this is, one of the real strengths of Brilliant, the Brilliant Consortium is that we are not going to be working in isolation. We're actually going to draw on the strengths from other African countries, and we have been working with them through other networks and other protocols. And each country has their own strength. We live in a bubble where we think that South Africa is the best and we do everything perfectly and there's nobody like us. But actually, when you talk to the other African countries, they may have things in place that we don't, and they may have processes in place that are far ahead of us. So there's always the opportunity to learn from other countries, to support one another. And Brilliant Consortium is really meant to be an African-led consortium, and we cannot do this in isolation. just as South Africa, we have to involve our other partners, our other African countries. And this is just going to strengthen the whole African effort. If we can show, solidarity from the African continent, this is just going to make the Brilliant Consortium that much more strong and also credible to the outside world.
This is the Brilliant series of podcasts, brought to you by the Consortium's Community Engagement and Advocacy Workstream, introducing you to the scientists, researchers, and community activists at the center of HIV vaccine discovery. Today, I'm speaking to CAPRISA's Dr. Nivashnee Naicker.
South Africa is really leading the Brilliant Consortium, right? So much of the leadership is based here in South Africa, not only in terms of the clinical trial oversight, but also in terms of, the vaccine development. Our collaborators are here. It's Afrigen and BioVac. They're also based in Cape Town as well. So a lot of the bioinformatica is also based in Cape Town. So a lot of the leadership is going to be undertaken by the South Africans, but this will also extend to the other African countries. This is not going to be an overnight process. This is going to be a slow process. And once we are in a position to, extend these leadership roles to other African countries, this will happen. So for now, the other African countries will serve as the clinical trial sites. I think 2 of them have already been selected for Brilliant 001. But moving forward, this is not going to happen in isolation. We're definitely going to be sharing across the countries our expertise and our leadership skills.
Brilliant has been described in different ways. In some ways, discovery research, experimental medicine. What is this about? What is this? When we first came in to Brilliant, we heard experimental and discovery. And as activists who have been in the field for quite a while, we were like, ooh, why are we saying discovery? Why are we saying experimental? Because for the last 2 decades, we've told communities this is not an experiment, and now we're kind of having to do this really interesting communications function of how do we explain to communities this concept of experimental medicine and research. Could you just explain that concept to us as it relates to Brilliant?
Okay, so I've really been here since the beginning. When I first started at CAPRISA, we were doing this beautiful study. It was called the Kambili study. And we had so much hope pinned on this trial that this was going to be our HIV vaccine candidate that was going to be successful. And within 6 months of starting the trial at CAPRISA, the trial was over, right? And we've had several failures over the years like that. Large-scale trials, a lot of millions and millions of rands invested into these trials. And they simply failed because we were trying to develop an HIV vaccine empirically. And when I say empirically, I mean we're trying to develop a vaccine not knowing what the exact correlate of protection is with HIV. Now, this has worked well for other vaccines. This works well for multiple other vaccines. It actually worked well for COVID. It works well for measles, multiple other childhood illnesses. This works well. This does not work well for HIV, given the complexity of the virus. Okay. So now, with our recent trials, the HVTN 703 trial, where we found that we know that the broadly neutralizing antibody is the correlate of protection for HIV vaccines. We are now finding ourselves in a new space in HIV research. We're actually going back to the drawing board, and we are trying now to see how can we work backwards to elicit these broadly neutralizing antibodies. So how is this done? This is not an easy thing to do. Let me start there. It's going to take us quite a few years to figure out how do we optimally induce these broadly neutralizing antibodies in people. So this is the discovery medicine part of it and very experimental research that we're doing now. This is really trying to give people a series of vaccines that would initially prime the immune system, and then you shepherd the immune system, and then you polish off the whole response, ultimately trying to achieve this broadly neutralizing antibody, which we know confers protection against HIV. So this is really it, Tian. We're just really trying to work backwards now, trying to figure the whole process out. We're in very early days. We're still at the phase 1 stage of this research. But there's very promising data coming out of the phase 1 trials already. Brilliant will also add to this when we start the Brilliant 001 trial. But it's still early days. We have a long way to go. I think this is why sort of that discovery medicine, experimental research words have come in, because we are still a long way off from where we need to be in terms of finding a successful vaccine candidate.
Could you, in a nutshell, answer this question? If you've never tested a product on a human being before, how do you know it's safe for the first human being to take that product as part of a trial?
So before you start a first-in-human trial, there are several processes that occur before this for you to get to the stage. A lot has happened before this. So number one is your laboratory testing, right? So somebody came up with a great idea. They test this in the lab firstly, right, to see if it's feasible. Once they've got the concept right and they've got the immunogen right, and they think there's something there, they then go on to preclinical testing. And preclinical testing is really testing in animal models. Now, we know an animal model is very different to a human being. Even if it's a monkey study, it's still very different to a human being. There's so many differences between the animal and a human being. But that's all we have to work with for now. And what we try to do is we try to choose the most optimal animal model for that disease. And with HIV, it's usually monkey studies that we do before these immunogens go into humans. We test them on monkeys. We look at the responses. We look at whether there's a positive immune response. We look at the safety profile. There's a lot of things that we look at, Tian, before these immunogens are actually put into humans. And without that data, that preclinical data, no regulatory body will ever approve your study without you having shown that you have done the necessary legwork before you've put this product into humans. And fortunately, Tian, in all the time that I've been doing HIV vaccine research, the products have been safe. There has not been an instance where, for our site in particular, I'm talking about CAPRISA, where we've come across a serious safety issue, where we felt that the trial needed to be stopped for any reason at a phase 1 stage. We haven't had that experience. So I'm quite confident, that the scientists that do develop these immunogens, they have tested these products pretty well. I'm talking from experience now, they have tested these products really well. They've studied them really well. When they give us a product to inject into humans and they tell us it's safe and tolerable, we believe them because it's been our experience that participants have been tolerating these products well. And to the point where they, for example, one of the studies that we're doing now, participants are even prepared to receive a fourth vaccination or a fifth vaccination in the trial. So we are really confident. And I will say that we do not take on protocols where there's any suspicion that there's going to be a safety issue in participants. For me, it's safety first. If there is no safety guaranteed with this product, we are less likely to take on the protocol. I'm not saying that safety issues do not occur. Safety issues do occur. But, there have been no serious safety issues. There have been nothing around, participants' life being put at risk and things like that.
At the height of the pandemic, we laid charges against the country's Chief Justice for his remarks around vaccines. And we filed formal complaints with the Constitutional Court to hold him to account for associating the vaccines, of course, with the mark of the beast, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, he was not alone. Conspiracy theories abound, everything from 5G in the vaccines to microchips to Gates trying to, wipe out Africa. We've run the whole gambit of it. And so certainly the anti-vax movement, the mis and disinformation movement is certainly very prominent. Some very senior South African doctors and scientists are at the forefront of this mis and disinformation being spread. A lot of our work that we did during the pandemic was recognizing that, the hesitancy, at least, comes from a historical context, because research and science has not always been kind to communities, especially Black and Brown communities historically. Of course, that has changed dramatically, especially in South Africa, in terms of how we do research and ethics and standards. But what do you think, what in your mind is the lowest hanging fruit to meaningfully build vaccine confidence in communities within a world where mis and disinformation is so powerful and so prominent?
Yeah, so Tian, we've had the opposite experience here in Durban. We've had, when the COVID pandemic came along, I think because of the years and years of community engagement that we've done already, our community really trusts us here. So we had a very positive experience where we were able to recruit participants, enroll them, retain them within our COVID-19 vaccine trials, even up to now. We've had a very positive experience. I find that there's very small pockets of people that really contribute to this vaccine misinformation, vaccine hesitancy. And the way to deal with them is really to, I think something that we can do easily is that when our trials are complete, we need to circulate this information. In the same way that they receive the information through the internet, we need to also circulate our trial data to show the impact that our COVID-19 vaccines have had on the population, how it has saved lives, how it has reduced hospitalizations. It's good for people that are involved in the research. For myself, example, I have also taken the vaccine as one of the first people to receive the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Not because I didn't think didn't have any side effects, but because it was a life-saving tool at the time. So if you're prepared to walk the talk and really show people that you are at risk of a disease like anybody else, you're the scientist doing the research, but you're also prepared to take the vaccines. I think we need to have a very strong show of support from the scientific world. Most of our staff took our COVID-19 vaccines. We didn't know much about the vaccine at the time. We took it because it was the right thing to do. It was what we had at the time. And we really need to build confidence in these people who are so hesitant to take vaccines. They're really undoing, the decades and decades of work that people have already put into putting good vaccine programs into place. For example, the measles vaccine, we know that many parents are not taking it now at the moment, and this is creating measles outbreaks in our schools. So they're just undoing the good work that people have done over the decades and placing people at risk. And, because these diseases haven't been around, there is no low-level exposure that has been ongoing, for people to, have adequate immunity against this disease, There's no natural transmission going on, is what I'm saying. So when people are exposed to the disease, they're getting a very full-blown picture of the disease. They're not getting mild illness, they're getting a full-blown disease. So people need to be really careful about what they're doing, the misinformation they're disseminating to communities, the undoing of the good work that has already been done in terms of vaccines. But as I said, Tian, I feel that these are very small pockets of people. These are often the very highly educated people and people who have access to private healthcare and have access to the internet and have access to all sorts of, groups that are going on out there. So I think these people really need to be addressed, but need to be addressed in a very scientific way. We cannot just go up to them and tell them, you need to take a vaccine. We need to show them the evidence. Everything is evidence-based these days. So I think that's how we need to tackle it. But we also need to show our presence on social media as well. So every time, there is data being generated, we need to, circulate this information. Because I feel that we haven't gone back now, after COVID-19. We know the impact the vaccine has had, but we actually haven't really showed them the studies, to say, look at the differences in the numbers of people who have died, who are unvaccinated, and people who are vaccinated and who actually survived the illness. Maybe that's a gap that we need to close.
I mean, as part of that affidavit that we worked on, it certainly showed, exactly what you're saying. You never take on anti-vaxxers because it purely amplifies their message. But what you do is you put out good, solid data. And like you're saying, the power of personal stories, of people who have been saved by vaccines and just the amazing impact that vaccines have had on our world, in the history and in the present. So I think that's really, really important. But, as we're talking about this, and now stepping back a bit from Brilliant and looking into the field in general, in recent weeks, lots of world headlines, lots of excitement, lenacapavir, amazing new option, et cetera, et cetera. But of course, the underbelly of that belies a different truth. We've just put out some op-eds around the issue where we've been saying we need a new level of consciousness amongst researchers and scientists in the world in general, in Africa in particular. And the reason why we're saying this is we're saying that here now we have an amazing product, and countries that took part in the trial do not have access to the product and have been excluded by the pharmaceutical companies from being able to manufacture or produce that product or even have access to it. And so it's such a tragedy, but it's also such a reminder to communities that in some cases research is not on their side because they've been part of these huge trials, and here they are now not having access to the product that they made possible. Where do you think we're going wrong in terms of the researcher and scientific community when setting up trials, when writing protocols, when it comes to securing meaningful post-trial access for the populations that make that research possible? Because of course, we're thinking about the long-term effects here. We're wanting communities to be excited about our research. We wanting communities to not have any hesitation and sign up for trials, believe in the science. But what they're practically seeing now with life-saving tools and life-saving products is that the research that they are making possible is actually not allowing them to access the products. And so then questions come back to the scientists and researchers that lead the study. We, as activists as well, have always amplified and put pressure and called out scientists and researchers to say, how are you putting your name towards a trial that might find an amazing product at the end of it, but you've not done what we believe is the hard and difficult work that COVID reminded us of securing agreements with pharmaceutical companies to ensure there's access beyond the trial. And currently, the feeling amongst some activists is that, well, as long as we complete the trial, we get our piece in the Lancet, we open up the next AIDS conference, to standing ovation, that's enough. And of course, we're saying, well, it can't be enough. And so where are we going wrong in terms of securing post-trial access at protocol development stage, in terms of securing the product should the research be successful for communities who make that research happen?
So that's an amazing point, Tian. Post-trial access is something so critical to all the research that we do. It has to be incorporated at the protocol development stage. And fortunately, many of our regulators are now insisting on this. The minute we submit a protocol to them, they are insisting what are the steps for post-trial access. And this is why I like the fact that we're so highly regulated in South Africa, because there are advocates out there that are looking at the long term and how are we going to provide post-trial access to participants. And you're correct, there are many amazing products out there. And we've seen this with cabotegravir. We just never got access to it. I mean, it costs a fortune and nobody has access to it yet. And this is just such a sad situation where we've done all the work. It takes years and years and years to do this research. It takes millions of hours of participants' time to contribute to these studies. And here you are sitting with no post-trial access. And this is absolutely not acceptable. And if us as scientists say that this is not acceptable, the regulators say this is not acceptable, the participants themselves say this is not acceptable, I think we are going to see a big change. Also, transferring the monopoly of the product from a big pharma, to local developers. This is why Brilliant is so important. Why we have to create these, not only vaccine hubs, but other hubs where we have access here on the continent and not rely on overseas players to provide us with this access. It's well and good, we have the altruistic researchers out there who are willing to give us products, but we cannot depend on that. We have to build something that's more sustainable, more concrete, more local, where we can say that we are testing this product. The transfer of technology is easily transferable to South Africa. We can manufacture the product here. This is what we need in the long term. We cannot rely on outside players for this. In the communities where the trials are being undertaken, so for example, with the Brilliant Consortium, we will have the capacity to provide post-trial access here on the African continent when that time comes.
So Nivashnee, communities, of course, at the height of the pandemic, at times saw researchers and scientists, one trial in particular that was looking at the use of the BCG vaccine in healthcare workers for COVID, went on record and said, people are dying, we're here to get the vaccine. You can't be talking to us about talking to communities. People are dying and you want us to engage communities. That's absolute, it's a luxury. It's irrelevant. It's not a priority, should not be a priority. So communities see that. They see organizations like the Health Justice Initiative fighting to have vaccine contracts open so we can see, where are these vaccines from, what are we paying, et cetera, et cetera. So communities, of course, are seeing all of this happening. They're seeing mainly white folk in the global north have access to vaccines that they made possible. They don't have vaccines. So communities are seeing all of this. They're living in this world. Why should communities continue to care about research? Why should they continue to respond to calls to participate in trials? Why should they continue trusting us when there is such a consistent stream of seconding communities and deprioritizing them, in this race for new products, et cetera, et cetera. So why should communities who have to contend with, the overwhelming pressure of just life, daily life, daily hustle, why should communities be giving portions of their life, their time, their dedication, their passion to clinical research today?
So I think there's nothing that we can do without communities. So we have to carry on the engagement that we've been doing with them for all these years. We have to address these issues with them. So this is where, our retention events become so important, where we actually have the opportunity to speak to participants, to tell them the challenges that we've been experiencing as well, to keep them up to date. I think if you're honest with participants, it's such a valuable tool to actually engage with them, to be honest with them, and to tell them things like it is. Participants don't want to be lied to. Okay, we know what happened with the COVID-19 vaccines. I kept projecting that slide where Africa just looked blank compared to the global north, We had no vaccines for such a long time. And but I find that, if you're honest with participants, you're transparent, you share your own disappointments with the system with them. They understand the situation that we're in. We may all be doing things for altruistic reasons, but that's not everybody's intention. And I find that, research participants, they really are motivated to participate in trials for very good reasons, and the common misconception is that people join trials for money. And this is not true. This has been my experience over the past 18 years, that participants generally join research for health-seeking behaviors. These are people that they are the worried well, obviously. They want to be part of new cutting-edge science that, where they may be protected against illnesses. They also they like that they have continuity of care at the research organization. We have clinicians that have been here for many, many years. They see them as their primary health caregivers. And it's really been a good relationship. We actually have a cohort of women who've been with CAPRISA for over 20 years now. Can you believe that? And they love coming here. And even when they've exited the trial, they still come back to tell us hello and just to keep in touch with us because they're just so used to seeing us and used to having us be their healthcare provider and to talk to us. So I think it all comes down to trust here. If there is no trust with your participant, with the community, if you're not honest with them, if you are hiding information from them, if you are promising things that are not actually possible at this time, then there are going to be problems between you and the community. So give them a realistic picture of what's going to happen, what they should expect, what the realistic picture of what the post-trial access is going to be. Give them all this information at the outset. Be honest with them. Tell them you're not sure whether your product is going to work. There's a 50% chance it may not work. There's a 50% chance it may work. And they will stay with you on this journey, and they will trust you, and they will be with you through the good times and the bad times. And we've had this experience at our site. I think it's nothing that we can't overcome. I think communities still trust us. We've done a lot of work in the past 20 years here at CAPRISA with community engagement. And I think we're going to leverage this for the success of the Brilliant 001 trial and Brilliant as a whole, the work that we've already done to date.
What is the one thing you would like activists to know?
We are on their side. We do not do things for our own personal benefit and gain. Most people I know that are in research, I won't say all of them, but most people that are in the research field, we're not here for money, number one. We are not well paid, okay? Most people are here for altruistic reasons. They see the bigger picture. They want to leave a legacy beyond their lifetime of having done good in the community, having made a difference in people's lives, having left people with a prevention tool or an HIV vaccine. That's what we want to see. It's something that's probably not going to be realized within our lifetimes. We're hopeful that, it may be realized, but, even if it's not, we know that we've started the process that one day, we will see the back of HIV. And that's ultimately my goal. I really want to see the back of this disease. It's been with us for many years now. We've almost gotten used to it. But when you see people on an individual level and how they suffer with this disease and how their families have suffered and the psychological stress and trauma of this disease. You don't want that. I mean, I don't want this for my children. I don't want this for my grandchildren. So we're not going to stop working. And we're all in this together. I think the minute you see the scientist as an outsider, I think that's when problems arise, that, you're in it for some other, I don't know, whatever personal goal that you're in it for. That's not the case. I can vouch for many, many of the researchers that are in HIV research at the moment, really. I mean, we could all be working in fantastic jobs for big pharma companies, international jobs, earning fantastic salaries, and we choose not to do that. We're here for a higher purpose, and I firmly believe that.
What excites you about year 2 of Brilliant?
Year 2, I'm really looking forward to getting the study off the ground. Okay, so the preparatory work is really the very mundane part of doing the job. It's actually when you start enrolling participants, getting the trial into the field, enrolling, recruiting, retaining participants. This is really the exciting part of the trial for me. I always appreciate the participants' willingness to join these trials, to have complex procedures done. It's amazing how much a research participant is willing to do in these trials. And it's really, I really commend them for their participation, their commitments to our trial, and they don't run away halfway during the trial, They're in it with us for the long haul. And it's really a journey with participants. So that's the really exciting part for me. So I'm really looking forward to all sites being activated and all of us starting the trial in the new year.
Is there anything else that you would like to say or share?
Tian, I'd just like to say thank you. And I'm so happy, as you mentioned at the outset, that we have a dedicated advocacy group in this consortium. It's not the norm. And we've also got wonderful people from within our teams, for example, at CAPRISA, at Cape Town, the other African sites, who have been doing this work for many, many, many years. And you're going to love meeting them. You're going to love working with them. Yeah, I'm just so happy that this is happening, and this is a dedicated part of research now. It's going to work wonderfully. It's something very important that needed to be done, and it's going to make Brilliant that much more strong.
You've been listening to the African Alliance podcast, the Brilliant series, bringing you these incredible stories of passion, innovation, and change that take us a step closer to an HIV vaccine. We're constantly inspired by the work being done by our guests, and I hope you are too. The work doesn't stop here. There's always more to learn, more to do, and more to connect with. Stay curious, stay engaged, and we'll be back soon with another inspiring episode from pioneering scientific research to impactful community activism. The individuals we feature on this show are not just changing their fields, they're shaping the future. To learn more about the Brilliant Consortium and how you can get involved, visit africanalliance.org.za and follow us on social media. If you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share the podcast so more people can hear these powerful stories.